Hello, my name is Abby Jamison. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide input into your company's training needs. The first thing I would do in order to determine whether or not your bank actually needs diversity training would be to conduct a needs assessment. Along with the past and current lawsuits, which do indicate a need for at least some type of training, I would also prepare and administer a survey assessing employees' thoughts and attitudes towards minorities, including race, gender, sexual orientation, and age, as well as acceptable communication, such as what constitutes sexual harassment. Research has shown that when surveys are based off of negative statements or carry negative connotations, people not only get offensive, they often say what they think they should say rather than how they truly feel. I would pose questions in a positive manner, such as, I believe the glass ceiling for women has been shattered, versus, if there is any difference in pay between men and women, it is because the man worked harder. Compiled responses can then be coded to indicate a general level of bias for the organization. I personally would utilize yes or no questions in order to make the coding easier. This can be done organization-wide or department-wide if necessary, and these numbers can be used as baseline data for future testing. I would then look to the organization of the culture of the organization. Culture can be defined as the unspoken actions and behaviors, mindsets, and social patterns of the organization. Organizational culture is shaped by its leaders and encompasses employee behavior, thoughts, actions, and sometimes most detrimentally, their actions and words towards or against others. Furthermore, culture encompasses what has been allowed. It defines what is acceptable, encouraged, discouraged, or rejected. What has been allowed up to this point? What are the ramifications or repercussions for offensive, off-color, sexist, or racist words or behavior? Does the bank promote gender or race gaps by their testing or their requirements? Do they actively seek to reduce ways in which to eliminate this bias from the very start, from their hiring process? Do their managers promote equality? Do they seek to increase diversity, reduce bias? Do they offer the same opportunities to women as to men, to blacks or Hispanics as to whites, to old as to young? Do they have specific policies about discrimination of any type, policies that are enforced? In order to assess culture, I would review complaints past and present. I would speak with managers, employees, and those who filed the complaints. I would speak with those who the complaints were filed against. I would review company policy, even things such as ads for job placement. Do they use words more likely to attract male applicants versus female? Do they unconsciously stereotype? I would give a careful review to what is allowed versus what is not, to what is perpetuated even unconsciously, maybe especially unconsciously. I would take note of what their onboarding process looks like. During the onboarding process, new hires learn what is acceptable and what is not. What are they learning? I would spend time listening and observing what is normal, common, allowed, to help determine the culture and whether or not lack of diversity training is actually the issue. As an external consultant, I would be well aware of the research on diversity training and its general ineffectiveness, and use that to factor whether or not diversity training is really what the bank needs. Rather than diversity training, I would, in its place, recommend training in communication and unconscious bias in the implementation of a mentoring program as well as self-managed teams. The first step towards this training would be to designate goals for the training. According to Lana, head of HR at Bedia, their goal is to create an inclusive environment where each member of the working community is valued, respected, and is fully able to contribute their talents. Training would be voluntary because we all rebel when we are forced to do something, and would consist of ongoing short sessions based upon communication and unconscious bias. In order to be able to test effectiveness, I would suggest 4 trainings once a week over the course of a month, with voluntary trainings thereafter. Unconscious bias training would involve first and foremost removing the stigma of bias. Iris Bonet, academic dean of Harvard Kennedy School, notes that we all carry bias just because we are human. Acknowledging that we carry bias is the first step. Bonet, however, notes that acknowledgement alone is not enough to change our bias. We must see counter-stereotypical examples in order to begin to change our bias. We need to learn to appreciate the male nurse, or the male teacher, or the female construction worker. Training would focus on content based upon real-life work situations and learning to appreciate differences in people and cultures by actively seeking situations counter to our own norms and standards, and by asking for opinions different than our own. Communication training would focus on active listening, how best to respond to offensive material. The answer is not always to file a lawsuit. Assertive communication skills in creating interpersonal relationships, as well as delineating what is acceptable and what is not in everyday conversation. Active listening includes listening with all the senses. It includes noticing not only what the person is saying with their mouth, but also with their body language and their voice. It involves fully concentrating on what is being said and allows for respectful conversation, even disagreement, once the person is completely done. It also involves listening to thoughts and ideas that are sometimes very different from your own, such as the aforementioned situation where you're actively working to fight bias. Assertive communication skills is another skill we can build through practice. That involves getting across what needs to be said in a respectful manner, and sometimes having to put our foot down, if we are in a position to do so, while allowing the losing party to maintain their dignity. Lastly, creating interpersonal relationships includes intentionally seeking out those you do not normally converse with or have relationship with, and getting to know and understand them. It does not necessarily mean becoming best friends, but it does help to garner respect and engender value for the person as they are. This is particularly the area that could help with customer service as well, which was a concern of the bank. Implementing a mentorship program as part of the training will allow those who already have these communication skills and are already aware of their own biases and are actively fighting them to help lead those who are just going through the training or are just becoming aware of their own biases, and to help change the culture of the organization, especially through the onboarding process. Getting it done before bias is ingrained is much easier than doing it after. Integrating self-managed teams into the workforce would be my last suggestion. Self-managed teams help bring people from different backgrounds and cultures together. They are aiming for the same goal, whether it be completion of a project or meeting their department goals. They are suddenly working together, and they are forced to lean upon each other. This is what Bonet meant when she said, seeing is believing. You see the value in your teammate. You see the value in the woman the older worker, the Hispanic, or let's be real, white males get a bad rap. It can help us see the value of the middle-aged white man and what they offer. Directly after training in communication and unconscious bias, I would again administer the survey. Post-survey trainings indicate that up to 96% of participants leave the training intending to change their actions and behaviors, especially when coupled with an action step, such as the mentorship program or part of a self-managed team. I would also implement a task force made up of representatives from different teams throughout the organization to evaluate changes in culture, engage in problem solving, help expose employees to different groups, and encourage social accountability, or to keep reducing bias. The task force would provide feedback and encourage continued conversation. I would then administer the survey in 6-month increments to help determine additional training needs. This is where it might be more beneficial to conduct the training in a department versus the entire organization if one department is particularly suffering. The bottom line, what the bank needs is an increase in communication. Communication helps to engender respect. It allows us to see the value in others, and it allows us to appreciate them not only for what they can offer, but for who they are. Thank you.